He spent his days unseen, cleaning after conversations that shaped fortunes. She spoke with certainty, amused by theories, unaware of the quiet man listening. What followed was not a clash, but a pause, one that shifted dignity, safety, and the meaning of being heard. Stay with this moment a little longer. Let the quiet speak. The building stayed awake long after most offices had gone dark. Light still spilled from the upper floors, pale and steady, reflecting off glass walls and polished floors. Voices drifted down the corridors, measured, confident, accustomed to being heard. The custodian moved through it all with a cart that squeaked softly when the wheel caught at the seam between tiles. He worked methodically. Trash first, then surfaces, then floors. The order mattered because it saved time, and time mattered because his daughter would already be asleep when he got home if he stayed too long. He checked his watch only once, then tucked his sleeve back down. The event occupied the central conference hall, a wide room dressed for importance. Tall windows framed the city in fragments of light. People stood in small clusters with drinks they barely touched, laughing at the right moments. He kept to the edges, replacing liners, wiping a spill no one else noticed. At the front of the room, a woman spoke without raising her voice. She did not need to. The room leaned toward her naturally. She wore a simple suit, nothing showy, but it fit her with the ease of someone who never doubted she belonged where she stood. She spoke about markets, about cycles and confidence, about how money moved when people believed it would. There was a lightness to her tone as she reached for an example. She smiled, glanced around the room, then gestured vaguely behind her. "Think of it like cleaning," she said. "Necessary, repetitive. You don't think too hard about it. You just do it and hope it keeps the place running." A few people laughed, not loudly, politely. The kind of laughter that agreed more than it found humor. The custodian did not stop moving. He finished tying a bag, slid it onto the cart, and replaced it with a fresh liner. He had heard worse comparisons before. Most days, words passed through him the way noise did present, then gone. But something about the casualness of it, the assumption that no one would mind, settled differently. She continued speaking, expanding on the metaphor, still smiling. The room followed. When she paused to take a sip of water, the silence stretched just a moment longer than expected. The custodian straightened, resting his hands briefly on the cart handle. He had not planned to speak. He rarely did. But the thought had formed fully, complete and calm, and staying quiet felt suddenly dishonest. "I think," he said, not loudly, not sharply, "it's only repetitive if you don't notice what changes." The room shifted. Heads turned. A few people frowned, uncertain whether to acknowledge him. The woman at the front lowered her glass slowly. He did not look at her directly. His eyes rested somewhere near the floor as if speaking to the space itself. "If you clean the same place every day," he went on, "you start to see patterns. Where people walk when they're nervous, what they spill when they're distracted, what they leave behind when they think no one's watching." No one interrupted him. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps because he hadn't raised his voice. Perhaps because he hadn't raised his voice. "Markets might look random," he added, "but they're built on habits, too. People repeat what feels safe until it doesn't. Someone has to notice before it gets messy." Silence followed, not the awkward kind, but the kind that asked a question without words. The woman studied him openly now. There was no offense in her expression, only attention. She nodded once, slowly, as if acknowledging something she had not considered. "That's fair," she said. Her smile faded, replaced by something more neutral. "Thank you." The moment passed. Conversations resumed, quieter than before. Someone cleared their throat. Another person checked their phone. The custodian returned to his work, pushing the cart toward the far corner of the room. He felt no satisfaction, only a mild concern that he had overstepped. He replayed his words once, then let them go. By the time he finished mopping the edge of the floor, the event had moved on to questions from the audience. When it ended, people filtered out in clusters, coats over arms, voices already drifting toward other topics. The custodian waited until the room emptied before moving more freely. He gathered discarded napkins, wiped down tables, stacked chairs. She returned alone. He noticed her shoes, first practical, unremarkable. She stood near the podium, looking around the room as if seeing it differently. When she spoke, she addressed him directly. "I didn't mean to diminish what you do," she said. He paused, cloth in hand. "I know." She seemed surprised by the ease of his answer. "Still," she said, "you were right about noticing." He nodded once. "It comes with time." They stood there a moment longer than necessary. He could feel the clock again, ticking quietly in his chest. "I should finish up," he said. "Of course," she replied. Then, after a brief hesitation, "What's your name?" He considered it. Names carried weight. They invited familiarity, questions, expectations. "I'm on the night crew," he said instead. "We don't usually cross paths." She accepted that, though something thoughtful passed over her face. Then, "Thank you again." She left without another word. Later, as he pushed the cart toward the service elevator, he thought not of her status or her apology, but of how easily the room had listened when he spoke. Not because of who he was, but because, for once, he had said something true out loud. He checked his watch again. Still time to make it home before his daughter drifted too far into sleep. The bus ride home was quiet, the kind that held tired people without asking anything of them. He sat near the back, one hand wrapped around the metal pole, the other resting on his knee. Outside, storefronts passed in a blur of muted color. He did not replay the evening again. By the time the bus crossed the river, the building and its glass walls already felt distant, like something seen through a window and left behind. His neighborhood did not announce itself. The streetlights were uneven, some flickering, some steady. A small grocery store on the corner was still open, its door propped with a crate. He considered stopping for bread, then checked the time and kept walking. Mornings were easier when he planned ahead, but nights belonged to his daughter. The apartment was warm when he unlocked the door. Too warm, really. He made a note to open a window later. The living room light was off, but the small lamp by the couch was on, casting a soft circle on the rug. A pair of sneakers sat near the door. Laces knotted the way she always left them. "Dad?" Her voice came from the bedroom, already half asleep. "I'm here," he said, keeping his voice low. She appeared in the doorway, hair damp from a rushed bath, wrapped in an oversized sweatshirt that reached her knees. She rubbed one eye with the sleeve. "You're late." "Not too late," he said. He set his keys down carefully, the familiar routine easing something tight in his chest. "Did you eat?" She nodded. "I saved you some pasta." He smiled, small and private. "Thank you." She padded back toward her room, and he followed, sitting on the edge of her bed as she climbed under the blanket. He checked her homework folder on the nightstand, flipped through it quickly, then set it back in place. Everything was where it should be. "Did anything interesting happen?" she asked, already turning onto her side. He thought of the conference hall, the pause, the woman's attentive gaze. "Not really," he said. "Just work." She accepted that easily. Children often did, when answers were steady. "Okay," she murmured. "Wake me up early. I want cereal, not toast." "I know," he said. He waited until her breathing deepened before standing. In the kitchen, he reheated the pasta and ate standing at the counter. The window above the sink rattled slightly when he cracked it open. Cool air slipped in, welcome and quiet. He washed his plate immediately. Dishes left overnight had a way of multiplying. When he finished, he wiped the counter twice, then once more out of habit. The clock on the wall read later than he liked, but still manageable. He sat on the couch for a moment, not turning on the television. His phone buzzed once with a notification from the building's scheduling system and adjustment to next week's hours. He read it carefully, calculating school drop-offs, aftercare, the small margins that held his life together. The woman from earlier surfaced briefly in his thoughts, not as an image, but as a tone, the way she had listened, the way she had not rushed to explain herself. He wondered idly whether she would remember the exchange tomorrow. He suspected she would. People unused to interruption often did. He stood, turned off the lamp, and moved down the short hallway. Before going to bed, he checked on his daughter once more. She slept curled toward the wall, one hand tucked under her chin. He closed the door partway, leaving it open just enough. Tomorrow would begin early. It always did. Morning arrived without ceremony. The alarm sounded once, then again, before he reached out and silenced it. He lay still for a moment, listening to the apartment settled pipes, the distant hum of traffic, the muted sounds of another building waking somewhere nearby. He dressed quietly and moved to the kitchen. The window was still cracked from the night before. Cold air lingered, sharp enough to pull him fully awake. He poured cereal into a bowl, set it on the table, then poured a second bowl halfway before stopping. He adjusted the portions, thinking of her appetite in the mornings, how it changed with the weather. She emerged, rubbing her eyes, dragging her blanket behind her like a small train. "You forgot the milk," she said, not accusing, just observant. He retrieved it from the fridge without comment. "I didn't forget," he said. "I was pacing myself." She considered that, then smiled faintly. She climbed onto the chair and ate with slow focus, spoon clinking softly against the bowl. He packed her lunch while she ate, folding the napkin neatly, checking the expiration date on the yogurt twice. At the bus stop, she leaned into his side, her head barely reaching his shoulder. He adjusted her scarf and tucked the loose end back into her coat. When the bus arrived, crowded and loud, he placed a hand on her back until they were seated. At school, she waved once before disappearing inside. He waited until the door closed behind her before turning away. It was a small habit, but one he kept. He liked knowing she had crossed the threshold safely. His shift began an hour later. He stopped by the grocery store on the way, picking up bread and apples, choosing the firmest ones. At work, the building looked different in daylight. Less impressive, more human. The floors showed their wear more clearly. The corners gathered dust again, just as they always did. He worked through the morning with the same steady attention. The exchange from the night before did not return until lunchtime, when he sat alone in the break room, unwrapping a sandwich. The supervisor passed by and nodded. Nothing more. No one mentioned the event. He had not expected them to. When his phone buzzed this time, it was a number he did not recognize. He let it ring once, then answered. "Hello?" he said. There was a brief pause on the other end. "We met last night," the woman said. She did not introduce herself by title. "At the building." "Yes," he replied. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she continued. "I asked facilities for your number. They said it was fine." He considered that. "All right. I wanted to thank you," properly, she said. "And to ask, would you be willing to talk again? Not about markets, just perspective." He glanced at the clock on the wall. "I have limited time," he said carefully. "My daughter comes first." "I understand," she said immediately. "We can work around if you're open to it." He did not answer right away. He thought of dinner schedules, homework, early mornings. He thought of how the room had paused when he spoke, and how rarely that happened. "Once," he said. "We can talk once." "Thank you," she said, and there was relief in her voice, though she tried to keep it contained. "I'll follow up with details." When the call ended, he finished his sandwich and folded the wrapper neatly. He returned to work without telling anyone. That evening, when he picked his daughter up from aftercare, she talked all the way home about a science project involving paper bridges. He listened, asked questions, carried her backpack when her arm tired. At home, as he set water to boil for dinner, she watched him from the table. "You're thinking," she said. "Am I?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "certain, but not in a bad way." He nodded once. She returned to her drawing, satisfied. The evening settled around them, ordinary and intact. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the small adjustments being made inside a modest apartment, adjustments that did not announce themselves but would, in time, matter. They met in a place chosen for its lack of importance. A small cafe near a public park, neither quiet nor busy, where people came and went without noticing who sat where. He arrived 10 minutes early, not out of eagerness, but habit. Punctuality had become a form of courtesy. He extended to the world, even when the world rarely returned it. He chose a table near the window. From there he could see the park's edge, a line of bare trees, and a bench where someone had left a scarf draped carelessly over the back. He ordered coffee, black, and waited. She arrived on time. No entourage, no visible security. Her coat was plain, her hair pulled back without attention. If she noticed him first, she did not show it. She ordered tea, thanked the barista, then approached his table with the same measured pace she had used the night before. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said. He stood briefly, then sat again. "I had an hour." "That's more than I expected," she replied, not as flattery, but acknowledgement. They sat in silence for a moment while steam rose from their cups. Outside, a child ran past the window, chased by an adult moving more slowly, laughing despite the cold. He watched until they disappeared from view. "I want to be clear," she said. "I'm not here to recruit you, or correct myself. I already did that." "All right," he said. "I'm here because you spoke without trying to impress anyone," she continued, "and because you didn't stay afterward to explain yourself." He shrugged slightly. "I had work." She smiled at that briefly. Most people would have stayed, made sure they were understood. "I don't mind being misunderstood," he said, "as long as I'm accurate." She considered that. That must make things simpler. It makes them quieter. Their drinks cooled between them. She asked about his schedule, not in detail, just enough to respect its limits. He told her when he needed to leave. She adjusted the conversation accordingly, never circling back when time moved on. They spoke about ordinary things at first. The building's age, how maintenance schedules changed with the seasons, the way people treated shared spaces when they felt ownership versus when they did not. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, she chose her words carefully, as if trying them on before committing. "I grew up believing attention was a currency," she said at one point. "If you held it, you controlled the room." "And now?" he asked. "And now I'm not sure that's the right measurement." He did not respond immediately. Outside, the scarf on the bench was still there. No one had claimed it. "Control wears out," he said eventually. "People notice when it's used too often." She nodded. "That's what I'm learning." She did not ask about his past. She did not ask why he worked nights, or why his phone buzzed once with a reminder that he silenced without explanation. The absence of those questions felt intentional, and he appreciated it. When his hour was nearly done, he checked his watch. She noticed and closed her notebook, though she had written very little in it. "I won't keep you," she said, "but may I ask one more thing?" He waited. "Would you be open to continuing these conversations?" she asked. "Not regularly, not formally, only when it fits." He thought of his daughter waiting at aftercare, of dinner plans, of the small margins he protected. He also thought of how she had listened without needing to be reassured. "Sometimes," he said, "if it stays like this." She understood what he meant. "It will." They stood. This time she extended her hand. He shook it, brief and steady. Her grip was firm, practiced, but she did not hold on longer than necessary. As he left the cafe, he felt no sense of anticipation. Only a quiet adjustment, like furniture, moved slightly to allow more light through a room. That evening at home, his daughter asked why he was smiling while chopping vegetables. "I wasn't," he said. She tilted her head, unconvinced, but let it go. Some things, he knew, did not need explanation yet. They did not see each other for several weeks after the cafe, not because either withdrew, but because life resumed its steady claims. His schedule shifted with the building's needs. Her calendar filled the way it always had, though now she left small gaps unassigned, unsure yet what they were for. When they met again, it was brief. A conversation in the lobby while he waited for an elevator, her coat already on, phone silent in her hand. They spoke about nothing that required remembering. The exchange lasted less than 5 minutes. Still, when it ended, it felt complete. From then on, their meetings followed no pattern. Sometimes they spoke twice in 1 week. Other times, a month passed without contact. There were no apologies for the gaps, no explanations offered. The absence of expectation made each encounter easier to enter. They learned each other slowly, through repetition rather than confession. She noticed how he always positioned himself so he could see entrances, how his attention sharpened when children passed nearby, even those unrelated to him, how he never checked his phone while someone was speaking, but always checked it the moment a conversation ended, as if returning to a different responsibility. He noticed how her voice changed when she was not addressing a room. Lower, less certain, but more precise. How she dressed with intention, not display. How she listened with her whole body stillness, eye contact, a patience that did not rush toward response. Once, she brought him soup from a place near the building, explaining simply that she had ordered too much. He accepted it without comment and ate it later that night, standing at the counter while his daughter worked on a spelling list at the table. "Who's the soup from?" his daughter asked. "Someone from work," he said. She nodded, satisfied. She cared more about whether there was bread. Gradually, their conversation shifted from neutral spaces to shared ones, a walk along the edge of the park after his shift ended early. Sitting on opposite ends of a bench, watching pigeons gather crumbs left by someone else. She did not speak much that day, neither did he. When they parted, she thanked him for the quiet. "I don't get much of it," she said. He understood without asking why. The first time she came to his apartment, it was unplanned. A storm had arrived earlier than expected, heavy rain turning streets slick and impatient. She had driven herself, dismissed her driver out of habit more than preference, and now stood in the doorway holding a coat soaked through. "I can wait in the car," she said. He looked past her at the rain, then back at her. "You can dry off," he said, "if you want." Inside, she stood awkwardly at first, uncertain where to place herself. The apartment did not impress. It did not try to. The couch showed where. The walls held children's drawings, taped and retaped. Shoes lined the entryway neatly, all small except his. His daughter emerged from her room curious but cautious. He watched the exchange closely, ready to intervene if needed. But the woman crouched slightly, lowering herself without being told. "Hi," she said. "I'm sorry I'm wet." His daughter considered her, then smiled faintly. "It's okay. We have towels." She fetched one herself, returning with a green towel folded unevenly. The woman accepted it with gratitude that did not feel performative. "Thank you," she said. "What's your name?" His daughter glanced at him. He nodded once. "Permission." After that, the room relaxed. They drank tea at the kitchen table. The woman kept her phone face down. She asked about school, listened to a description of a paper bridge project with full attention. When she laughed, it was quiet, surprised. Later, when the storm passed and it was time for her to leave, she paused at the door. "Thank you," she said again, "for trusting me with this." He nodded. "Thank you for fitting into it." She left without asking when she could return. That night, as he tucked his daughter into bed, she asked, "Is she coming back?" "Maybe," he said. "I liked her," his daughter said, then rolled over, already done with the subject. He turned off the light and stood in the hallway a moment longer than usual, aware of how much had shifted without anything being promised. After that evening, her presence entered their life without announcement. Not often, and never assumed. Sometimes weeks passed without her crossing their threshold. Other times, she appeared on a quiet afternoon with groceries she had asked permission to bring, standing in the doorway as if waiting to be invited into a story already in progress. She learned their rhythms by observing them, not reshaping them. She arrived after homework hours, left before bedtime. She never took the seat at the head of the table. When she stayed for dinner, she washed her plate and dried it carefully, returning it to the cabinet exactly where she had found it. The child watched her closely. Children noticed what adults forgot to hide. She noticed that the woman never interrupted, never corrected, never tried to earn affection with gifts. She noticed how the woman listened, how she waited her turn even when excitement pulled at her words. One evening, while he cooked, the two of them sat on the floor assembling a puzzle with missing pieces. The woman did not rush to complete it. She searched methodically, setting aside pieces that did not fit without frustration. When they finished, they discovered one piece was still absent. "That's okay," the woman said easily. "It still works." The child looked at her, surprised. "Really?" "Yes," she said. "Some things don't need to be perfect to be done." Later, as the woman put on her coat, the child asked, "Are you rich?" The question landed plainly, without judgment. The woman crouched to meet her eyes. "I have more than I need," she said. "But that's not the same thing." The child accepted that answer, filing it away. On weekends, they sometimes met outside the apartment, a museum on a free day, a walk along the river where the wind pressed cold into their coats. The woman paid when tickets were required, but did so quietly, without ceremony. He did not thank her excessively. They fell into a balance neither had named. He noticed changes in himself, small ones. He planned meals with an extra portion in mind, then adjusted if she did not come. He found himself considering how a story would sound if told aloud, how silence could be shared without effort. She noticed changes too. She left meetings early when they ran long. She declined invitations she would once have accepted automatically. In rooms where her presence once filled space, she began to leave space instead. They never spoke of what they were building. There were no late-night confessions, no reaching for hands across tables. When their shoulders brushed in narrow hallways, neither reacted. When she sat beside him on the couch, there was a careful distance, respected by both. Trust grew not from intensity, but from repetition. One evening, after the child had gone to bed, they sat at the table with cups of tea growing cold. Rain tapped softly against the window. "I won't always get this right," the woman said quietly. "Being here." He nodded. "Neither will I." "That's not what I meant," she said. "I mean, I don't want to disrupt what you've built." "You haven't," he replied. "You asked before entering." She considered that. "That feels important." "It is." They sat in silence after that, the kind that did not require filling. When she left, she paused at the door, then leaned in and kissed his cheek. Brief, careful. He did not follow her out. He stood where he was, absorbing the moment not as a beginning, but as confirmation. In the weeks that followed, nothing changed dramatically, which he realized was the point. The notice arrived folded among ordinary papers. The change in contract terms phrased politely, almost apologetically. The building's management was restructuring overnight services, outsourcing portions of the work. Nothing immediate, nothing final, but enough to require flexibility. Different hours, rotating locations, less predictability. He read it twice at the kitchen table while his daughter worked through math problems nearby. He did not react outwardly. He had learned not to. But something tightened all the same. That evening, he adjusted dinner plans without comment. He listened as she described a disagreement with a friend at school, offered a steady response, asked the right questions. The work of being present did not pause for uncertainty. When the woman arrived later, he told her about the notice only after the child had gone to bed. They sat at opposite ends of the couch, the space between them familiar now. "I don't know what it means yet," he said, "but it means less control." She listened, hands folded in her lap. "Would it help to have someone look at it?" she asked carefully. Not to intervene, just to explain. He considered the offer. He trusted her restraint, but the line still mattered. "Maybe," he said, "if it stays informational." "It will," she said. There was no offense in her voice, only understanding. A few days later, the school called while he was on shift. His daughter had fallen during recess. Nothing serious, they said, but she was shaken. He asked for permission to leave early. The supervisor hesitated, then agreed. By the time he reached the nurse's office, his daughter was sitting upright, a small bandage on her knee. She brightened when she saw him, then tried to hide it. "I'm okay," she said quickly. "I know," he replied, kneeling to her level. "I just wanted to see." He signed the paperwork, thanked the staff, walked her home instead of returning to work. That night, after she fell asleep, he sat alone at the table longer than usual. The notice unfolded again in front of him. He did not call the woman. Not that night. Not the next. She noticed the distance without interpreting it as withdrawal. When she did reach out, it was brief. A message asking if everything was all right. No follow-up when he did not respond immediately. They met again by chance in the park near the cafe where they had first spoken. He was watching his daughter play on the swings, pushing gently, counting without counting. The woman approached slowly, stopping a few steps away. "Hi," she said softly. He nodded. "Hi." They watched in silence for a while. The child noticed her, waved once, then returned to her rhythm. "She seems good," the woman said. "She is," he replied. "That's the point." She understood the weight behind the words. "I don't want to complicate that," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why this is hard." He did not elaborate. He did not need to. The truth sat between them plainly. His responsibility was not theoretical. It was immediate, constant, unforgiving of risk. "I can step back," she said after a moment. "If that helps." The offer was clean. No drama, no plea. He felt the cost of it immediately. Not as loss, but as absence he could already anticipate. "I don't want you to disappear," he said, "but I can't ask you to wait either." She nodded, eyes steady. "Then we don't decide today." They parted without touching. That night, as he tucked his daughter into bed, she asked, "Is everything okay?" "Yes," he said, and meant it, though the word held more weight than usual. Later, alone, he stood by the window, looking out at the city. Responsibility had shaped his life carefully, deliberately. It had kept him grounded. It had also kept him cautious. He did not resent it, but he felt for the first time how heavy it could be when shared futures began to take shape at its edges. They spoke again not because something demanded it, but because enough time had passed to allow clarity. The meeting was her suggestion, offered without urgency. A neutral place, she said. Somewhere neither of them had history. They chose a quiet public library with long wooden tables and tall windows that softened the afternoon light. People moved through the space with intention. Voices lowered out of shared respect. It felt appropriate. He arrived first, as he usually did. He sat with his hands folded on the table, watching dust drift in the light. When she entered, she spotted him immediately and approached without hesitation. She did not smile. Neither did he. There was no need to soften what they were aware of. "Thank you for coming," she said. He nodded. "I had time today." They sat across from each other. Between them lay nothing but the grain of the wood and the quiet of the room. "I've thought about what you said," she began. "About responsibility." He waited. "I'm used to choice feeling limitless," she continued. "If something doesn't fit, I change it. I solve it. But that's not what you're protecting." "No," he said. "It isn't." She folded her hands together. "I don't want to be something that introduces uncertainty into your daughter's life." "She already knows you," he said, "and she trusts you." "That makes it heavier," she replied. He considered that. "It makes it real." They sat with that truth for a while. Outside, a bus passed, the sound muted through the glass. "I won't ask you to rearrange your life," she said, "and I won't offer to fix things that aren't mine to fix. But I want to be present in a way that's honest, even if that presence stays small." He studied her face. There was no performance in it now. No anticipation of outcome. Only resolve. "I don't need grand things," he said. "I need consistency. I need my daughter to feel safe, not impressed." "I can do that," she said, "and if I can't, I'll step back before it costs her anything." The care in that promise mattered more than the words themselves. "I won't rush this," he said. "I won't move faster than I can hold." "I don't want you to," she replied. He leaned back slightly, the decision settling not as relief, but as alignment. "Then we continue," he said. "As we are, carefully." She nodded once. Carefully. When they stood to leave, there was no hesitation. She reached for his hand this time, not across the table, but as they walked toward the exit, her fingers wrapped around his, warm and steady. He did not pull away. Outside, the afternoon had cooled. They parted at the steps, neither lingering. That evening, he told his daughter he would be picking her up early the next day. "Why?" she asked. "Because I can," he said. She smiled, satisfied with that answer. As he turned off the lights that night, he felt something unfamiliar settle into place. Not certainty, but trust. Not promise, but direction. He was enough. The changes did not arrive all at once. They rarely did. They arrived the way seasons shifted, noticed only after the air felt different, after habits adjusted themselves without announcement. The work situation resolved into something workable. Not ideal, but stable. A different building, earlier hours, fewer nights that bled too far into morning. He accepted it without celebration. Stability was not something he praised aloud. It was something he protected by continuing. Mornings grew quieter. He walked his daughter to school more often, their steps falling into a shared rhythm. Sometimes she talked, sometimes she did not. Both were allowed. On days when she waved and ran ahead without looking back, he stood until the door closed behind her, just as he always had. The woman became part of their life in ways small enough to fit. She learned the route to the school, the names of the teachers, the sound of the apartment at night when the city quieted just enough to hear it breathe. She never stayed when invited out of politeness. She stayed only when invited with intention. She brought nothing that needed space to be made for it, no luggage of expectation, no demands disguised as generosity. When she helped, it was specific driving when he could not, sitting quietly during a difficult homework assignment, waiting in the hallway when he needed to speak privately with his daughter. The child began to include her naturally, not with declarations, but with assumptions, saving her a seat at the table, asking her opinion on small things, handing her a drawing without explanation. The woman accepted these offerings with care, never grasping, never asking for more. One evening after dinner, the three of them washed dishes together. The child dried, serious about the responsibility. The woman handed plates over carefully. He stood at the sink, listening to the ordinary sounds that had come to mean safety. Later, when the child was asleep, they sat on the couch with the lights low. The woman rested her head briefly against his shoulder. He did not move away. He did not pull her closer. The moment did not need to become anything else. "This feels right," she said quietly. He nodded. "Because it's not trying to be anything." She smiled at that, and let the silence return. There were no announcements, no lines crossed dramatically, no future named out loud. What grew between them did so the way roots did, slowly, unseen, holding without asking to be admired. On a Sunday afternoon, the child asked if they could all go to the park together. The woman looked to him first. He nodded. They sat on a bench while the child played nearby. The woman leaned back, eyes closed briefly, face turned toward the sun. He watched the child run, then glanced at the woman beside him, present and unguarded. This, he realized, was what home could be. Not a place defined by walls or ownership, but by how carefully people moved within it, by how little anyone had to pretend. When it was time to leave, the child took both their hands without thinking. They walked that way, three shadows stretching ahead of them on the pavement, unremarkable to anyone else, but held